Hi, and welcome back to the Empathy Evolution. Today we have an awesome guest. Her name is Katie Hicks. She is a very old friend of mine, and she is a straight-up socialist. She is a therapist working with the Juvenile Justice Department through an organization that provides services to the youth there. She is a volunteer at Open Books, which is focused on prison reform, and a volunteer at Food Raising Friends. We're so excited to have Katie. We have no idea where this conversation is going to take us today because she is so passionate about so many topics, and we are just thrilled to get this conversation started.
Woo! Welcome.
Let's go.
Let's go.
I'm nervous.
No, don't be nervous.
I know. She walked in today and she said she was nervous. I was like, we talk all the time. So when we volunteer together, we're together for many hours.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a short-term thing. We're normally together 4 or 5 hours at a time, and her and I tend to kind of be together working closely. She's even been to my house.
Oh, that was fun.
And her and my daughter actually share a lot of the same interests. They're both really creative artists.
A lot of anxiety.
Yeah, they both have. They both have. I mean, you both have like a mental health diagnosis in regards to anxiety, and so you've been a huge support to her and to me. As you know, my daughter is 9, so we're raising her, and you've kind of been through and felt some of the things she's felt. So I know she adores you. I do too. And Katie's art is hanging on my wall in my house.
Oh.
And she actually posts pictures all the time on social media. So, you know, if you have a chance to check out her social media, she posts her artwork a lot.
I do.
And you have opportunities to buy it. And I'm always like, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. Well, no, because she's super talented. And I think that a big part of this is like local love. Like, you're involved in a lot of local nonprofits, you know, and we want to support you as well. And I think creativity, especially with this whole movement in schools that often is focusing more on academics, and we're losing some of these creative side things. It's important to support that.
It's really unfortunate to see like art programs get cut and underfunded.
But I mean, and I don't know Katie very well, so I'm excited to talk to you. And for listeners that don't know you, I think that there's a lot of value that you're going to bring to this particular session. So, you know, as just from me doing my basic research, you know, you're really passionate about a lot of things. Like, I think the last post that you had was about the Israeli-Palestine conflict that's going on. There's, you know, you have a lot of things that you can educate people on. But I think the most impactful thing for me is that you said a very old friend, but you're not very old. You're 29, and that you're so active in helping causes that people, like, even like myself, I'm ignorant to, only not because I want to be ignorant to it. It's only because, you know, I have 2 kids, you know, that are 6 and under, and, you know, I have a business I run. So I'm interested to know, you know, this platform is something that you have the ability to talk anything about. So, you know, why are you so passionate about causes that you feel should be important?
Well, I think if you start at what this podcast is about is empathy. I think a lot of people don't realize, like, empathy is not unique. First of all, the lack of empathy is unique, and it's a personality disorder usually. Like everyone has
when
empathy.
You're unwilling,
or but like
to
so you have that. You already have to recognize, like, you do have that within you to start change. Like, and it does, like, macro global change starts at such a micro level that even though you don't see that change instantaneous, like, in the community necessarily, or like on a global level, like, think of like trickle down, but like it trickles up. Like, it goes up. So it's
growth.
Within,
it really is almost like planting a seed at the micro level, and it grows.
It's a lot of seed planting.
Yeah. And
conversations, compassion, like connecting when you're with organizations, and I'm in the middle of Dream Defenders campaign school right now, and to be inducted and be a member of Dream Defenders by August. And so in campaign school, we're talking about right now just like canvassing and deep canvassing, and just getting out in the community and knocking on doors, which can be dangerous for some people in some parts of town. But, like, you know, Dream Defenders is a Black-led abolitionist organization, so we're in Black neighborhoods trying to get encourage Black people to vote and educate them, and just trying to make a connection. But you don't, like, start out with, like, here's all this legislation and I need you to sign this. You're like, hey, what's up? Like, can I talk to you? You're just like, you can't make a connection without compassion.
Right.
Which is, I think, something that Ella Baker, who was a SNCC founder, that she kind of ran her organizing platform on was like you have to reach out to people on their level. Like that's just such a social worker thing, which is what I do, is like meet people where they're at.
And I think what's really interesting and fascinating to me is that, you know, we were kind of talking about this earlier, is that there's such a generational pass down of information or misinformation, as we were mentioning, and it's dangerous to do that, you know, because of all the misinformation that exists in the world, and some of it's purposefully misinformation, which is, to me, the worst danger of all. And so I think what is interesting for me is that a lot of, from the very few conversations we've had, I feel like a lot of your passion about that becomes, it comes from a place where there was misinformation that you were given or experienced that really makes you seek the truth. Do you feel like that's true?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely times in my life where I didn't have the same beliefs as I do now. And not even necessarily the same beliefs, but the same values, I guess, or the same moral compass even. And I've gone on to do things that I was raised not to do. Like I'm in recovery, so like I got into drugs and I got into be in dope houses and places that like I would have not thought I was ever going to be in childhood. But the compassion when you're on that side of things, when you're queer or you're a drug user or you even believe in a different political platform or you belong to any oppressed group, when you're on the other side of that and you're receiving the oppression, whatever that may be, whether it's sexism or racism, it kind of changes your view on the systems that you once held in place. Because I'm like, okay, I feel like things that I was raised to believe, even, I don't know if this is dicey to say, even like Pledge of Allegiance, like having kids stand, like if you looked at a video of communist China, like everyone in this area, like communist China, and they're all pledging allegiance to a flag. What is different from that than the indoctrination of patriotism in America? Right. It's the same thing. It's just your side of the coin, so it looks differently. Absolutely. So I lived in my bubble and on my side of the coin for a really long time until I like crawled around the coin and on top of the coin. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many little rivets on this coin. There's so much more than what I grew up to be. And I didn't grow up like, you know, without or sad or, you know, all sorts of things. But I knew there was a struggle somewhere, and if I had the means to be involved in it, then I had an obligation and a due diligence to be involved. So
yeah, and I think that's really, you know, and I think because there's so many people that don't force the opportunity or don't seek the opportunity to check out the other sides of the coin, they are comfortable with living in that bubble. And we were talking about how like sometimes there's almost a whole movement of people against a social justice movement because they're like, oh, well, you know, like you're sticking your nose in places that you shouldn't.
Absolutely. I think that whenever you were saying something about the oppressed party or the, but I almost think about it as like opposition. There's always opposition to the opposition. And opposition can be, I'm not saying it's always good. I think there are moments that we have to be really reflective. Are we being prideful? Are we opposing something just for the sake of being like a devil's advocate? And I don't think that's bad either because it causes us to think critically.
Right.
However, in general, opposition is normally spurred from some type of change that actually needs to happen for the betterment of a community or society. Yes. And I'm one of those that very much believes one voice can make a difference.
Right.
And so I'm like you know, the seed planting is a one-person job, but growing a whole garden can be a multiple, person job when I think about growth. And having known you since you were a kid, I mean, I think I probably met you when you were around 9, maybe a little bit older, maybe a preteen. And knowing your family, you talk about your journey and how you've changed. And it's like this. You haven't, I think you've acknowledged, I haven't 100% made perfect decisions in my life. However, I can't go back and change any of those. But it absolutely changed my perspective and how I plan to move forward with my life because of the experiences I had. And so, when I interact with you, I'm always like, Katie is extremely passionate. She's extremely authentic. She has nothing to hide. And I mean, I'm just so first of all, I'm super proud of your recovery. I think if anybody is watching this and they are in a circumstance where they need to go into recovery, I think you and I are huge advocates for that. I think there's a lot of freedom in that, and not like me and you discussed before this, not just freedom from drugs and alcohol or from substance abuse or any sort of addiction that you're struggling with, but the freedom of completely being able to embrace wholly who you are.
Yeah, and just freedom from that whole lifestyle, which robs you of any chance to be who you are. Like, I was just so sad. Like, and I have had moments in recovery where I've been sad.
Yeah,
and recovery
isn't perfect.
It is not at all. People slip up. I've slipped up. It's up and down. And for some people, recovery isn't total abstinence. It's more of a harm reduction approach. Maybe they're trying to cut down on how much they use, or they're only using, medical marijuana, which is kind of looked down upon in a lot of 12-step groups, which is why it's really hard, especially in this area, to find a recovery group that I feel like is authentic, even and not completely white-centered, because I just refuse to kind of be in spaces that are just like, not let go and let God, that he can't do any and everything, but just like, you can't let go and let God out of poverty and racism. Does using drugs make all of those things a lot more difficult to deal with and face? Absolutely. But like, they're not just going to go away with prayer. Like, the stress may be alleviated. And I think it's just so much more than that.
That everybody's path is different.
Your road to why you're using is different, and your road to recovery is going to be completely different.
But I think that hopefully the end result, no matter what, results in a freedom for yourself. And that's so my experience. But also, I think in approaching your social work and the way I approach what I would consider the people we serve through Food Raising Friends is my own story and my own shortfalls that I've both overcome, but that I still know I will face as I go on. Like, accepting I'm not perfect now, nor shall I ever be. I think even on my Facebook, one of my things is not perfect. Like, this isn't the perfection page, because I'm a perfectionist by nature. And so it's fighting that. I am not perfect. I'm not going to interact with everyone perfectly. I'm not going to do everything perfectly. I'm not going to live perfectly. I'm not going to be able to 100% do right by anyone. But I've gained empathy and compassion for the people I serve. So instead of judging them for ending up in the circumstances they're in where they need my help, instead of judging the students that you serve through the juvenile justice system and looking at them and going, you're such a screw up.
You're a bad kid.
Exactly.
Which is
you're
such
saying
a terrible
everybody's
thing to say
made
to
mistakes.
kids.
And so it's more about how are we moving forward. I understand you were put in circumstances that caused or that incited you'd have to live a certain way and do
crimes
certain
out
things.
Of needs, which is
absolutely
why a lot of people do, and people
so
want to say
you have compassion
but
instead of looking at them.
I promise that's why that happens. Like, and it's cool and fun. It's an adrenaline rush and all that stuff, but like, people don't naturally like want to sell dope and do all that stuff for the rest of their life. Like, people don't want to live that way.
And so you're giving them compassion and empathy, and then instead of them looking at you as, oh, you're so perfect, you can say, and I've made mistakes too, and here I am today, and so I'm offering you the hope that you don't have to continue in this pattern of behavior.
You don't have to do it.
Well, and I think that's a freedom too.
And I think too, like, when we're talking about empathy as a whole, when you're talking about how kids get to this place, or how someone gets to a place where they're finding other things to make them feel good about themselves, whether it's drugs. And I think that something that is a misconception is that trauma comes in all shapes and sizes, right? And so a lot of things come from trauma, social justice, drug addiction, they're in positive, negative forms on the other side, right? But a lot of that comes from a negative or powerful experience that they had, and what may be trauma to you or I, maybe something different for someone else. So I remember even after, I had this whole PTSD moment where after Hurricane Ivan, which was a hurricane that came to the Panhandle, we had lost everything. And I didn't realize until years down the road that was really a trauma where I had pieces of my memory that I didn't remember that portion of my life. Yeah. And that spurs a lot of anxiety, which led me to become someone who has a medical marijuana license.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that, when we were talking earlier, you said something about, some trauma that you'd experienced, and you felt like it wasn't something that was enough to share with someone and find help for. And so you internalized that.
Oh, yeah.
Which led to some of those things. And I think that, when we're talking about empathy, there has to be more people who explain to friends, family, children, even other adults, like, hey, if you ever have something that's like eating you from the inside,
like, share it.
Get
it out. Say it out loud. Kanye has this lyric in one of his songs. He's like, it's like, today I thought about killing you, premeditated murder. It's a really good song, I promise.
Yeah.
I promise.
Sounds like it.
But he says, just say it out loud, see how it feels.
Yeah.
Say it out loud. I'm like, I always tell my kids that at work, and I'm like, just say it out loud. Just say it out loud and see how it feels.
So,
like, maybe you don't say it again. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to think it. Just get it out of your brain. Just say it.
But them having a safe place to say it, because when you're offering them the opportunity. So empathy is understanding versus judgment. So if they say it, the reason they would hesitate is because they're going to feel judged on the output. And so you're saying, say it, and I'm not judging you. In fact, we're going to figure out why you feel the way that you do that would cause you to want to say that. And I think we've been talking so much about empathy, and that's kind of the whole premise of this. And when she and I sat down, she goes, what do you want people to walk away with? And I said, I really want people to walk away with the skill of empathy, because it's not just thinking and giving understanding, but it's work.
Yeah, it's a verb. It's like love. Like,
absolutely.
You don't just like, oh, I love you. Like, I have empathy for you. Like, okay, you have to do something about it. If you're empathetic without inaction, you're just an observer.
Right. Absolutely.
Like,
so you could be an observer of empathy, or you can be a practitioner of it.
And I think you have to be careful with empathy too, because empathy can be used to manipulate people.
Yeah.
That's how Emmett Till is dead. A white woman's tears. People empathized with that, and now he is dead, and she has now, since she's still alive, I'm pretty sure, has said like that actually never happened.
Wow.
And nothing's being done. But that was empathy that was used to manipulate. You said something earlier. Misinformation is the purposeful misinformation. Like, purposeful misinformation is just another way to manipulate.
Yeah. But then even when someone's manipulating you, see, the part of me that practices empathy says,
like, why are you?
I want to understand why you feel the need to
manipulate me. Exactly.
Yourself.
There's a very close person in my life, and I felt continually, actually, I would say to this day, feel continually manipulated by them. But when I was younger, I didn't know how to create a safe boundary for feeling that manipulation.
Boundaries.
And a few years ago, I said to this person, I said, at this point, I can't trust you. I said, because people get tired of feeling like someone is always trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And so when I look at this person with empathy, I think a lot has happened to you. You have a lot of trauma. Your parents have caused a lot of trauma. You've made choices that in turn caused, some trauma is put on us. Some of it we've put ourselves in. But trauma is no less important, or should not be. I think I talked in another episode about ranking things.
Yeah, like if I'm drowning in 5 feet or while you're drowning in 7, we're both drowning.
Yeah. Trauma is trauma, and we can't say, well, if you did it to yourself, or you put yourself in a situation that your trauma is less worthy than someone that trauma happened to them. No, both need work, and both need understanding, and both need someone to look at me and say, I see the best in you even when you're not being your best. And so that I see the best in you even when you're not being your best is how I see this person.
Okay.
I can look at you and say, I can see all the wonderful qualities about you, but I know where you're not being your best, and that's where my boundaries come in. And that's where I know when you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes, I'm not comfortable with that anymore. And so I can still show you empathy without having to feel manipulated.
Yes,
and so
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so that's when you're talking about, the manipulation is like, even in that, how do we work out empathy? And I think that's where the action of it comes in. It's not just like simply offering her empathy. It's really me taking the time to work on myself and say, how can I still show her empathy even when I feel she's undeserving of it?
Right.
Hey, it's Bree here. Thanks for listening to Empathy Evolution. We'll get right back to the show, but I want to take a couple of minutes to give a shout out to some incredible friends and sponsors. First up is Empathic Practice. When I talked with owner Felipe Munoz, he was so excited to support our mission at Empathy Evolution. If you haven't heard of them, I'll tell you that they've quite literally changed my life. They're a holistic wellness clinic that's in Pensacola, Florida, and they provide services like massage therapy, mindfulness and meditation coaching, and they have a physician named Dr. Haast who can determine if you qualify for a medical marijuana card. I'm a huge supporter of Felipe and his business, and I'm grateful that he is a sponsor for our show. Check him out by visiting their beautiful website full of resources at empathicpractice.us. Up next is Scarlet Magazine. This is the publication you guys have been waiting for, the latest in women's fashion, beauty, home decor, lifestyle, and health. They say we at Scarlet aren't afraid of something new. We aren't afraid to be different, and we don't care who you are, who you love, or what you look like. We want to empower women of all shapes and sizes and walks of life. And if that doesn't describe Becca and I in a nutshell, I don't know what does. So check out the latest issue of Scarlet Magazine in the Pensacola-Destin area, or you can view the digital subscription at issue.com. You can also visit their website at scarletmag.com or visit their Facebook page to see what they're up to. Because frankly, we know you give a damn. Becca and I want to thank you for listening and remind you that we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this production. My team at Social Icon does all the producing and promotion, and Becca's nonprofit, Food Raising Friends, does all the giving, and we continue to support her in doing that. We appreciate all who listen and hope you'll show us some love by leaving a review, sharing, or sending us a note of what you liked best about the conversation. Now, back to the show.
Which I think that plays
about empathy way too much.
No, that plays into the prison system a lot too, because in the beginning of Our Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis, she talks about most people have never been in a jail or prison.
Yeah.
If you've never been arrested or been in prison, you've never been in one, or if you've never worked in one, so you actually have no idea what it's like in there.
Absolutely.
No idea. But because we have Hollywood, because we have media, because we have movies, we have TV shows, people think they have an idea of what it's like, which even the portrayal in Hollywood...
media isn't actually depicting real life?
It's not real life.
Whoa. Whoa.
I mean, if prison was as well run and compassionate as Hollywood's portrayal of it, which it's really not even that good looking on TV.
Yeah.
It's still nowhere near what the actual conditions are, but people like completely lose empathy for people who are incarcerated, and it's really mind-blowing, especially when you've worked in incarceration. And I've worked in the psych ward at a prison and dealt with some of the absolute most bonkers stuff
people
ever.
You can curse on this show.
Okay, the most absolute bonkers shit I've ever witnessed in my life. But there's also practices that are happening within the prison that are completely illegal and that are completely overlooked, and no one gives a shit. There's no empathy. It's like once you've done something wrong and you're locked away like an animal, first of all, if you cage an animal, do not expect it to act like an animal when it comes out. The criminal
worse
criminal thinking skills are so sharpened in prison. And it's such a cycle that, like, I have a friend who's supposed to be released from federal prison soon, and he's going to be on probation for 5 years afterwards. And I'm just like, I hope this works out. But I know the system is designed for you to slip up and there be no grievance or leniency or, like, nothing for you. And then you're just going to go back to prison. Obviously, I hope that's not what happens. And if it's anything that I have any influence over, there will be no slip-ups or anything.
Yes, but you can't change him. He can only change himself.
And I can't change the whole entire system for him as much as I would love to.
And I think that's interesting that you bring that up, because and I think there's so many sides. There aren't enough resources, because there are some, right? There are some for people, but there's not enough. And I think and what's crazy from my perspective is that my husband has worked in law enforcement for 10 years. And so there are little changes that can be made, but even so, they have to be intentionally done. Even with, my husband, Trent, was able to implement video visitation, which for them they thought was expensive, but really what sold it was that it's a money-making machine. However,
it is. Absolutely.
Two sides of the coin is that a family, I mean, his vision on it was that a family at Christmas doesn't have to take their young child to a jail to visit with their family
to bring
member.
the kid into a prison.
On the phone, and that socially and mentally is a better situation for a family. And so there's some of these like little systematic things that need change too. And so I think there's some really interesting there's really interesting information on like prison reform, you know, and I think that's stuff that needs to be talked about on both sides.
I mean, and we live in such a GE group, like they make so much money for the state of Florida. Like, or GEO, I'm sorry. They make an incredible amount of money doing privatized prison work. Like, one of Florida's biggest money makers is privatized prisons. So you're not going to find legislation, you're not going to find leaders who have powers to change legislation or influence legislation, back any kind of reform on prisons or policing. I mean, most of the bills, like the George Floyd Act bill, whatever, it gave more money to police officers.
Well, and I think
for training and stuff, right. But it's like, that was the opposite of what that kind of was fronted to be. So everyone's like, yeah, and they're like, no, this was like, that's like the opposite of what people asked for. Like, you continued the funding.
And it's probably a challenge because there's probably still a lack of willingness. Because one thing I was even thinking when you were talking is it isn't just about the program, it's about the buy-in from both the people who have to practice it and the public. And without buy-in, I say buy-in, I mean, it's not like people paying in, but that buy-in that says, I'm willing to do it a different way. I'm willing to try this. I'm willing and I'm open to this. But instead, we want to make everything that we're trying to change still fit in these boxes that really are what we're really experiencing is that they don't work.
Yeah,
but then we want to create policy and procedure that somehow still fit in the box.
Yeah,
instead of making a new way over here.
Yeah.
Well, and the funding has to be like when you're talking about like as far as a whole for any system, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not enough, there's not enough people in place to say what happens with this funding, right? Like it should be a collective, educated, intelligent, diverse group of people to give feedback on where things need to go. Because I think that the funding is necessary for education, but what kind of education are we providing?
What does that look like? What is what is that training looking like? Like, is it inclusive? Does it include how to handle a mental health situation appropriately with like maybe no weapons or what have you? And I understand the situations are obviously like in the moment and high stress.
I can't imagine being a police officer in those moments, but I do think that there still needs to be a collective effort to
well, there should be empathy.
And police officers, they have the highest rate of suicide of any profession.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Is at the end of the day, it may not be...
People who are not well, which I've professional. You can't help people when you're not well.
Like hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So
police officers, to me, they still lay their lives on the line. I guess when you speak of the George Floyd thing, the thing I go is that at some point in the progressing minutes, when it wasn't so immediate, that different actions could have been taken.
Absolutely.
And so there's where procedural things come in. And sometimes they think we're just asking the wrong people to reassess how we do things. I think education is another great example of this. Most of the people making decisions for police officers, for school districts, for a lot of federal policies, they're not asking people in Milton, Florida what to do. They're not asking people in their local schools. They're asking people within their own circle.
They're asking people who donate to their campaigns and who show up to their fundraisers. Like, those are people...
And they're still relying on the people in their circle or people within their friend circles. So maybe we're going one more level deep, but... It's not that... So we were talking about... You said, the trickle-up thing. It's the trickle-down thing.
Oh, yeah.
By the time it trickles down to Milton, Florida, is it really effective in Milton, Florida?
Yeah.
Whether it's education, whether it's police procedure, whether it's some sort of federal policy. We are not a one-size-fits-all country by any stretch. And I think we need to stop seeing ourselves that way and being willing to have conversations
locally
with people.
Locally, that's the thing.
Yeah, having better conversations at the local level.
People want to be
and letting it extend
this
from there.
Like global, like game-changing superstar, whatever. And it's like, that's... If you're in activism or organizing for clout, you're probably like more of like a Sean King kind of person. And you're probably shady, and there's just no room for that. Like, it's not about you getting your name recognized. I'm just learning about Ella Baker in the past few weeks. I'm like, I cannot believe that I didn't know about her. I mean, I've heard her name in the past, and as it relates to SNCC, but I had no clue I just had no clue, and I've just been mind blown everything I've learned about her and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and just how people organized and got the word out without the freaking internet.
Yeah,
Which,
I mean,
like,
something I
mind-blowing.
admire about you, though, is the reason that you're just now hearing about it is because you're constantly willing to learn. And
I love to learn. Learning's the
Yeah.
best.
And
Like, literally anything. Like, I just want to learn. Whether it's, like, local news that takes me down some rabbit hole somewhere else, or, like, things that, not that local news doesn't matter, but, like, bigger things.
Yeah.
Or just, like, random facts about animals. You know, just, like, literally anything.
she doesn't look at dog pictures. She reads articles about dogs.
that's so important with the show in general is, like, the empathy evolution. I think the one thing that I've kind of gained from this is that, you know, there's both sides of the coin, or there's several facets of the coin, and we've talked about a lot of different things, but the core of it is that we're going to have a respectful conversation about your viewpoint, my viewpoint, Becca's
Absolutely.
viewpoint. And I think that if anyone could gain anything from this episode, it's that you don't put people in a box of what their situation is. Don't pretend that you know, or not pretend, but don't assume that you know all the facts of something just because of your own experience, right? And so
Exactly.
Yes.
we encourage people that listen to Empathy Evolution that if you feel that there's someone and you're, you know, challenge them. I mean, even
Like a call in versus call out. I was reading about that recently. And
Yeah, that's
like,
a great analogy.
like calling out, you know, get on the internet, like, yeah, which I mean, I've done before, maybe to complete strangers, and I've maybe been on a Facebook ban a time or two, but like sometimes things happen. And you get banned from Facebook. My next ban's a 30-day ban, so we'll see. Hopefully, I've been laying low on the internet, so I haven't. But it's usually for like violent threats, but it's usually like a dude who won't leave me alone. I'm like, please pull up on me like this in person. I'm not a keyboard warrior. I'll take a knife out and then I'll mace you. Like, leave me alone.
But
Like, just
you know,
leave me
but you
alone.
feel that way too, based on what I know is some of your experiences. And so
Yes.
for me, when we're having this conversation, so interesting how Bree's saying these three different perspectives, and I go, to me, this whole conversation is all about perspective.
Yes.
You know, Katie, we're not as passionate about many of the things that you know what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I kind of stay in my wheelhouse with my passion because I put my entire energy and life into serving children
But
who
your
are
passion
marginalized.
is so intersection. Like, there's
It
so
does.
much.
There's
like,
so much in it.
when you posted
and that's
on
why.
Coming Out Day about, like, you know, we feed queer kids and kids end up houseless.
Yeah.
Because they come out and they're gay or they're trans or gender nonconforming or whatever, and their parents are like, no, you're not, get out of my house, which is mind blowing. Some people cannot wrap their head around that truth. Like,
Yeah.
not kids don't only yes, kids get abused and they die from being gay. Like, they are bullied,
Absolutely.
they kill themselves, their parents
Hiring.
abuse them, and sometimes it ends in death. But some kids are kicked out and they just continue to live day to day being neglected by their family because of their sexuality or their gender. So when I was in front of, I was at a stoplight and I was on my phone on Facebook, I will admit it. But I remember where I was. I was at the stoplight in front of Hammersmith.
Yeah.
When I was reading that post, and I literally cried.
Yeah.
Because
It's super
that's like
important.
and it's crazy because it's a bold statement to make in this small conservative town. Like, hey, we will feed you if you are gay.
I will feed you
I
no
will
matter
feed you
what.
if you're gay. And people were probably like, Becca McKeithen. She's just over there feeding
she's
gay.
very progressive.
She's very progressive. Her liberal politics and her food pantry, and I'm like, come on, girl.
But so like I was saying, we're not necessarily going to identify with every single thing you're passionate about. And even if we disagree, I still respect what you do because you enter it with the willingness to give empathy to me when I don't understand, and to also give others empathy when maybe they're not, aligning their vision with your.
That's what I've been
because
working
you're
on a
willing
lot.
to learn, and you also give others the opportunity to learn too, which I think is super important. I think that the show, what is he called? What are we calling him over there? That guy.
Travis?
It's been giving us the numbers.
Yeah, I know. So we're getting close.
We're
He's like,
supposed to be ending.
cut. Yeah, no, I think
We've been
so.
cut about 4 times.
As we go through, like the end of the show here with Katie, I think if there's anything that you can give advice to someone about practicing empathy, or to really see from a different perspective. Is there anything you want to leave with listeners?
Yes. Do not think because you do not know something that you do not have a place in the struggle, because education is a part of the struggle. Learning and growing is a part of the struggle. And as you learn and grow, you will find your place. There is something for everyone to do in the struggle. Like everyone, even the people who are, I'm actually an introverted person. Like talking to people randomly on the street it's a lot for me. So I'm like, I have a lot that I have to learn and overcome and work on. But ignorance is really no longer an excuse because you have the internet, I feel like. So
and opportunities.
And
like
you have
this.
there's just so much opportunities. So stop wasting time and get out there and pull the F up for your people. Pull up for people who aren't your people.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
Like
good.
pull up for everyone who needs help and who's vulnerable. Because you need allyship. Like you do need it.
Yeah.
It's important. Donate to local charities. Follow them on Facebook. Like involve them in your algorithm. Like I know that sounds crazy,
That's
but
true.
like star them, like their stuff, so you see the things that are going on in the community. Strive Pensacola is the socialist trans initiative in Pensacola. They do so much for the queer community, trans people specifically. They help with hormone replacement therapy. They help with housing, groceries, built, like literally any and everything for a population that is completely vulnerable, especially in this area.
Marginalized, yeah.
Very marginalized. So there's just so much local stuff that you can get involved in. So just pull up and don't waste any more time.
Thank you
You
so
heard
much.
it here, folks. You pull the F up. And if we could say anything, don't forget that the solution is the empathy evolution. We'll see you next time.